Now, I have got a sheaf of documentation here from the Home Office, and this is all figures that they've been giving us over the course of the last 2 weeks, because every single week we ask them for more information. And we have here, for example, the asylum seekers in receipt of Section 95 support by the top 5 nationalities in the region. We've got the East Midlands, the East of England, London, North East, North West, Northern Ireland, Scotland, South East. And guess what? The numbers of people who are being housed in this country is going up and up and up. It says here, immigration statistics. This is just for the year ending March 2020, by the way. So we don't even know how much numbers have risen since then. But I can tell you that Nigel Farage probably can tell us that it's risen by approximately 3,000 to 4,000. Nigel Farage joins us right now. He is, of course, the leader of the Brexit Party, the man who has single-handedly brought this issue to the fore and to the front of and centre of the media. The rest of the media, Nigel, of course, have forgotten about it now because they did it last week, but we haven't forgotten about it. Very good morning to you.
Good morning. Yeah, I mean, look, the actual situation with dinghies crossing the channel is now part of mainstream media debate. It took me a very long time to get it there, and you were very helpful with that, Mike. But that story they are now covering, and as soon as this storm passes and the dinghies start to come again, that will be talked about. What we tend to focus on through the media are the numbers being taken into the reception centre at Dover. What's not being discussed enough are those that are landing on our beaches and simply disappearing. And there are plenty of those as well. When it comes to where everyone's being housed, I guess of the things that I covered, the one that did get the most coverage was the constituency in Priti Patel's own constituency,
yes.
the Rivenhall Hotel. Now, of course, that was an acute embarrassment to the Home Secretary. I can tell you that the migrants in that hotel have now been removed. I don't know where they've gone to, but they've been removed. But since I started exposing the hotels, I have literally had hundreds, perhaps even into the thousands of people reporting to me from all over the country. Yeah. Hotels being filled, empty offices being converted into residential accommodation, private houses, council housing being repurchased by councils. From what I can make out, it's the northwest of England that is bearing the biggest burden of this. What I'm also certain of is there is a growing sense of anger in these communities. Anger that, their own, pregnant daughter can't get on the council housing list. Anger that we've got people who served in Afghanistan, Iraq, that are living rough on our streets, and real anger amongst people who legally want to come to the United Kingdom, are happy to go through the hoops, happy to pay the money, that you can come here illegally, be housed, given full health care. I mean, in some parts of the country, they're even employing teams of GPs to make sure that we give all the migrants full medicals and any treatment that they need. So I do sense that the one thing that gets the British about this is it's just not fair.
Exactly right. And you're totally correct, by the way, and I can confirm, because I've got the figures in front of me, that the Northwest is in fact taking by far and away the largest brunt of this, because I'm looking at figures, and these only go up to March 2020, remember. 10,000 people are housed in the Northwest. That is by far and away the biggest number of any of the other areas that I'm looking at. And it says here that the Northwest, in terms of the numbers of people from whence they come, Iraq, 1,562, Iran, 1,191, Pakistan, 788, Albania, which we've discussed before, 654, Nigeria, 469, and the most interesting one is other, and these, of course, will be the ones who throw their IDs into the sea, so nobody knows where they're from, 4,995.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, of course, now are coming from Africa. And your figures there don't reflect that, but a lot of people are coming from Eritrea, countries like that.
Well, that will be I guess, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But look, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Even the United Nations last week said that over 70% of those who go from Libya to Italy or Greece would never qualify as refugees.
Right.
And this is the point we've got to make. All the language that gets used in British media is about asylum seekers, people seeking refuge. The correct word in the overwhelming majority of cases is illegal immigrants who've come into this country via criminal gangs, who've come into this country because the pull factors here are so great. Now, We keep hearing tough words from Priti Patel. We know that Boris Johnson is now under huge pressure from, at least 40 of his own backbenchers. And we are told that some primary legislation may get put before Parliament this autumn. But the problem is, how many more thousands will come and need to be housed and put pressure onto those communities before anything passes into law? And I actually think that the government needs to say to the European Union, as part of the negotiations that are ongoing, we are overriding the Dublin regulations, which allows people effectively not to claim asylum in France, but to come to Britain. And we're going to overrule them immediately. That's the only way we're going to stop this flow this year.
Yes, exactly right. Because the 40 MPs who have got together to write a letter, they are seeking a change in the law which would make it possible, or impossible rather, for asylum seekers to come here if they've previously passed through a country where they could have sought asylum, which seems to me to be a sensible move. But as you say, you know what's going to happen. It'll be a year before any legislation gets into the sort of the law books. And there'll be some idiot who says, why don't we just have an amnesty and let everybody stay?
Well, then the worry, of course, here is that the Prime Minister himself, when he was Mayor of London, twice suggested amnesties for all illegal immigrants who'd come into London. So we have a Prime Minister who is very soft on this. I still think in her heart, the Home Secretary wants to deal with this. I genuinely do. But she's got to have the Prime Minister and Cabinet fully behind her.
Absolutely right. Because the other problem, of course, that we're seeing, Nigel, as well, is this latest kind of manoeuvre by local councils to put out quite sort of aggressively messages to private landlords saying, do you have any properties that we can rent from you? They claim that they're going to offer them slightly less than the market price, but don't worry, because you'll never have a problem with the tenants because we'll pay for it and you will always get your bills paid at the end of every month. And it's quite an extraordinary state of affairs, as you say, when ordinary people from this country cannot get themselves on the council housing list.
Yeah, no. I mean, this is a growing problem, and I would say that of the messages that I've had back from the public, at least a quarter are from people saying, look, this is happening. Here in Coventry, there's a hotel with 250 migrants in, gangs of people walking around the town. And yet, here we are with a heavily pregnant daughter, who has been through a tough time, and we can't even get her on the council housing list. So, yeah, this is a growing issue. I mean, look, we have an exploding population anyway, which has put massive pressure on social services. And all we're doing here is adding to it in the most extraordinary way.
Well, we keep being told we've got a housing shortage, don't we? I mean, how is it possible that somehow councils in this country can find the money, because they're always also telling us that they haven't got any money because the government has taken all their money away. They can suddenly find money to house upwards of, I think we've counted this number before, but it's upwards of some 50,000 people over the last few years.
Yeah. I mean, the last official figure we have is 48,000 people currently being housed, but that's before this big wave across the channel happened. So, it's obviously now in excess of 50,000. It is a staggering number of people. The budget for this is 4 billion sterling for the next 10 years. That's an underestimate. But hey, add on to that the cost of social security payments. Yeah. Add on to that the cost of healthcare, and you start to look. What was the old Warren Buffett quote? A billion here, a billion there. So we're talking real money.
Yeah, absolutely right. And this is the other thing as well, that, nobody will tell me. We keep asking them. Serco, the Home Office, they go backwards and forwards. One refers us to the other. Yeah. The other one refers us back. We keep saying to them, at what point does lockdown release the people who are in these hotels into private housing? And where do they go?
Yeah, well, of course, what really happens here is that people go through the refugee claim process in this country. It is a very slow, very lengthy process. It also, of course, has the right to appeal. And that means many of these people will be housed in these hotels for a long period of time. At the end of that process, when the majority are rejected, as surely they will be, that's when the even bigger problem comes. Because that's when we find, that probably only 1 in 4 and that's historic, only 1 in 4 of those whose claims are rejected ever get removed anywhere else. The rest just disappear off into effectively a form of modern day slavery in Britain, where they're picked up by the gangs. And I'm afraid we've seen this, haven't we? We've seen the exposure of the rag trade in Leicester. Yeah. We repeatedly see some of our giant agribusinesses, employing very large number of illegal migrants. And I've also had a few tip-offs about one or two construction companies who are clearly quite happy to employ illegal labor. Do you know why? Because it's cheaper.
Because it's cheaper, yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. Well, listen, we all know, I mean, anecdotally, all you got to do is walk around the streets of London and see guys sitting on walls having their sandwiches at lunchtime to know where they're coming from. There's nothing against these people coming here to work, absolutely not. But let's do it right, let's do it properly, let's protect them, and let's make sure that they're paying taxes as well. And we know all about the Albanian story because we've been told that by several sort of senior police officers that most of the Albanians coming here, and this is not by any means a slur on Albania, but an awful lot of the people that end up coming here from Albania are working in the cocaine business.
Yeah, and I mean, you could even talk not just about illegal immigration, Mike, you could even talk about legal immigration and just I tell you what, do yourself a favor, have a look at how many Metropolitan Police arrests there have been of people of Romanian origin over the last few years. And that's legal immigration because we supported Romania joining the European Union, even though the country, with Bulgaria as well, wasn't out of the grip of organised crime.
It really is quite extraordinary. And what about these people that we've seen over the last few weeks, Nigel, since you've exposed this particular scandal, talking about how it's our fault, we bombed these countries, therefore we've destabilised them. I mean, in my view, it's complete and utter nonsense because we certainly didn't bomb Pakistan, as far as I remember, or Iran, or indeed Albania. And yet...
Or Eritrea. Or
Eritrea, or Sudan.
Or Sudan.
And I don't know
Mali.
And I don't know whether you heard the story that we did last week, where we had a call from a guy in the Isle of Man who's got a daughter who works in a Christian charity in the Sudan, right? And she's told her father on the phone, all we see now is guys coming, human traffickers coming into our camps, giving people mobile phones and basically showing them your video from Anfield saying, come to Britain, you'll be able to go to Anfield, you'll be able to see the Football League, you'll be able to see the Premier League, you'll be able to have a house, you'll be able to have a hotel room. I mean, incredible. And basically the families of these young men are giving up everything they've got to send them to a better world.
Well, if I become the trafficker's pin-up boy, I'm rather upset by that. But
it's extraordinary, though.
But all I was trying to do was expose the truth. Look, as I say, Boris Johnson's government needs to put in place primary legislation very, very, very quickly indeed to stop all of this. It is the pull factors that are bringing people into this country. We are ridiculously soft on those that come here illegally. We've started to get a bit tougher on those that want to come legally from outside the European Union. We've got to get a grip on this very, very, very quickly. And I just, I cross my fingers and hope the government delivers. But I tell you something very interesting. All the problems that Boris has had, problems with their dealing of the coronavirus pandemic, problems with the current farcical situation with education, where they keep on making statements and U-turning and all the rest of it. But if you actually look at detailed polling of in which area has the government's support from the public fallen the most, it is over immigration. And all the lovely people who spend their lives in Westminster, who work in politics and media, all thought and wrote, many of them, after the referendum, oh, isn't it marvellous, darlings, that nobody in Britain really cares about immigration anymore. And what I think I've helped to highlight is that people care deeply.
Yes.
One of the reasons we voted Brexit is we wanted to get back control of our borders. And the Prime Minister, who has a majority of 80 on the basis that he will deliver Brexit, is at the moment failing hopelessly on borders.
Well, the good thing is that the Home Office now listens to this show, Nigel, because after we spoke the last time, we put it to them. In fact, they rang us while the show was on to say that, it was nothing to do with Nigel Farage that we issued that statement. It was just because, somebody else had reported it. And we said, well, entirely coincidental that you issued this statement the day after Nigel turned up at the hotel, right? But you know what was interesting? We asked them specifically, when was Priti Patel made aware of the fact that these people were in a hotel in her constituency. You know what they said? Friday, the day after you went there, which tells me that the civil service, the Home Office people who work for Priti Patel, actually put these people in a hotel in her constituency without telling her.
That's possible, but if you are the MP, I mean, if I was getting tip-offs from people living in Priti Patel's constituency, you would assume that Priti Patel's staff and her agent would have known about this, wouldn't you?
You would have thought so. You would have thought so.
I mean, my assumption, Mike, is if I hadn't exposed this, nothing would have been said.
Yeah. I mean, my argument simply is this. I believe that there are people in the civil service who are actively undermining the government because they don't agree with it. And that, for me, is an absolute no-no.
Well, look, of course, there are people in the civil service and there are people in, Romania, and some of them work for the BBC and some of them work for the British Library and some of them work for the British Museum. And all of them seem to have a shared hatred and loathing of what this country is, what it stands for, what it's always stood for. And that's why you're seeing, such abject, weak behavior when it comes to the illegal migrant issue. It's why we are seeing this crazy, woke business where the words of hope and glory won't be sung.
Oh, I know. Well, that was going to be my last question.
Why you're saying, founders of great collections in museums, statues being removed, and there is a link here between those who were the most ardent supporters of Remain, almost allying with a Marxist cause, which is to destroy our national identity, to make us ashamed of who we are, so that the great Marxist revolution can come and we can all finish up having one world government. And if that sounds like an exaggeration, just have a look at the website of what the Black Lives Matter movement actually stands for.
Yes, absolutely right. It was going to be my last question to you about Land of Hope and Glory. I'm going to continue to play not only the song, but also the lyrics of Land of Hope and Glory for the rest of this week, leading up to the last night of the proms. And I'm just wondering, what more can we do? Can we organise some kind of mass sing-along at some point or other? The way these people do their kind of, let's all demonstrate in favour of something. Well, how about we all stand up, the quiet, silent majority of this country, stand up and admit that actually we love Land of Hope and Glory. We love Rule Britannia. I don't care whether people say, oh, yeah, but we don't really rule the waves anymore. Just shut up and sit down if you don't want to sing it.
Well, absolutely. And let's remember that these songs actually are about liberty.
Yeah.
They're about us fighting off European tyranny. And when it comes to slavery, Britons never, never, never shall be slaves, which I thought was a very inspiring theme for Brexit, actually. Yeah. But let's just remember, shall we? It was this country that was the first, not just to abolish slavery, not just to abolish the slave trade, but to spend nearly half a century through the Royal Navy driving slavery out when many of our neighbours wished to continue with the trade. Compared to other Western countries all over the world, when it comes to slavery, actually we were the ones that began and helped complete the process of abolishing it. And I wonder how many people in British universities are being taught that at the moment.
Exactly right. Nigel, a pleasure to talk to you once again. Thank you so much for joining us and have a very lovely Tuesday. We shall talk again soon. Nigel Farage there, a man that speaks a great deal of sense, a man who is always welcome here on the home of common sense. We don't need any lessons in history from the Guardian reading, yoghurt knitting, lentil munching morons who think that there's something wrong with the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I'll tell you what, we're going to play Rule Britannia. We're going to play Land of Hope and Glory until you're sick of it. This is Talk Radio.